life. What you're saying is making me sick. That's Lorraine.
Cleared up the priests as in protected them? He was supposed to.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, he's supposed to protect priests who assault children because that's their policy. And if he doesn't, they're all implicated. It's like what I found in the Indian schools in Canada. I talked to people who worked in these death camps where children were routinely killed. And the honest people said, well, if we talked about it, we'd go to jail. There was an understanding that from the government and the church that you cannot report this stuff. Otherwise, you're implicating yourself as well in the system. So there's a law of silence everybody operates by. And if they don't, they're crushed and you never hear about them again. Right?
Francis of Assisi on his deathbed prophesied an uncanonically elected pope who would be called the Destroyer. Is that Francis?
I think that's church propaganda because there's very little record actually of Francis of Assisi, and most of it comes through the church. So you got to always ask, where's its source? Where's it coming from, right? The problem with the Franciscans is they quickly became incorporated. Francis, before he died, said the first rule of the Franciscans was no priest was ever to handle money. Okay, the church was to remain poor. The Franciscan order was to remain poor. Within a century, you got a Franciscan pope conducting holy, quote, holy wars. And things like the guy in the third largest death camp in Europe in the 1940s was the Jasenovac death camp in Croatia, run directly out of the Vatican by a Franciscan bishop, Ivan Saric. So that's where Franciscans end up, you know, I mean, corrupted by the church. So you got to always question these church kind of descriptions of Frank of Assisi.
AE wants to know the names of all your books.
Okay, well, my books you can see on Amazon. You can go to murderbydecree.com and go down the list. You'll see a lot of them listed. This is the one we're talking about, Dethroning a Rogue Power. And it was actually addressed to sympathetic people in the UN who are actually trying to move on it, trying to bring motions forward to have the Vatican expelled. And also just write to me, angelfire101@protonmail.com. I can get you the books. Depending on where you live, I lecture and travel all over North America and Europe, and will be again in the fall.
Claudia, have any clergy been shut down for trying to expose the violators?
You better believe it. And I know a lot of them. When I got thrown out of the United Church, I was part of a group called the Ministers Mutual Aid. And do you know that about 1/3 of all clergy, and we're talking Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, whoever, about 1/3 of us get forced out of the church through unlawful means or unfair labor practices. So just fired on the spot. You know, the old guard don't like what your sermon was, you get canned, you know, and blacklisted. There's a lot of clergy out there, men and women, who are put through hell, but they don't want to make controversy. That's this whole clergy attitude that, well, we don't want to divide and upset people. You know, we need a 12-step group for ex-church people, and there's a lot of them out there. And I can work, you know, I work with these folks, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. Or if you know of anyone who needs that kind of help, just write me.
Yeah, that would be great. Let me see. Let's see. We're getting towards the final questions now. We're gonna have to end this at the hour. Kevin's almost been on for 2 hours right now, so get your final questions in, folks. Does the violation of the kids fracture the mind and cause multiple personalities and dissociative disorder?
Absolutely. That's one of the chief characteristics when you're violated. Now, it varies a lot. It doesn't hit everybody that way, but I learned in working with the Indian residential school death camp survivors, this was a big topic because a lot of them suffered from it. And what we found was the reason that children, when they're brought into these camps, they were deliberately raped. Any child who arrived on the truck was instantly raped. They were taken in, beaten, and raped. Now,
violated. Let's say violated.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Okay. I'll repeat that. Children who were brought in and were systematically violated, that was for a reason. We found this later through government and military files that were shared with us in the course of our first tribunal. It was done deliberately because when you violate somebody that way, the human mind dissociates. You create multiple personalities to survive. And that's why a killer, multiple personality killer, is often found not guilty, because you need intent to commit a crime, and they lack the intent because the other persona was doing it. Well, MK Ultra needed people, little children who were already programmed to have multiple personalities, because when you're creating like a sleeper agent or a sleeper assassin, that's what you need. You need MPD people. So these were factories producing MPD personalities. That's why our campaign and me and I have been so attacked, because we're uncovering stuff that's still being used and is being perfected in the era of COVID, right? So trace the source of things and you'll find out what's going on now, right?
Is the Vatican Bank underwriting BRICS new currency?
Yep, they're one of the main funders of it. I think the main funder.
M13, will the nature druids win over the sadistic church?
I hope so, because I'm descended from them. On my mom's side, we were O'Neills from Northern Ireland. We were the last of the Druid kings. And it was funny when I did that thing in Rome with the exorcism, the next morning that tornado hits, the first one in 48 years. And I'm thinking, my partner, Carol, said, well, you know, your ancestors are druids and they could control weather, Kev. Maybe they were your ancestors were kind of plugging into a druid there. I don't know, but it's the druids have gotten a bad shaft from the church. You know, they sacrificed children and all that because they were the spiritual opposition when the Church of Rome was taking over that whole in Britain and Ireland and that. So, you know, the Romans went in and destroyed all the druid encampment, and Anglesey, I think, was that they just massacred every druid they could find because they were earth-based, nature-based, you know, natural law, the opposition to papacy, right?
If all good Catholics leave, then they would have less power, right?
Who would have less power? The church? Yeah.
The good ones. Does it mean that it would become more evil? The church would become even more evil if all the good ones left?
Well, they're not sustained by their members. That's the thing about, you could have 5 Catholics in the world and would continue because they're not essentially membership driven. They're driven by money and power, and they would maintain the facade. They need to maintain the facade. So no, if you leave, you mean if a lot of good people leave, you're saving the lives of children, because you know you won't have that participation, and it'll be seen for what it is, not a church, but a criminal money-sucking power.
Just need to give a disclaimer before I give you this question. I'll say that sarcasm is the height of an intellectual cripple, because this is from my partner, mother of baby Ziggy. Kevin, would you please bring some holy water from your trip to Italy for Shaun? He needs it.
Oh, that's really cute. Well, all water is holy. All water is holy. It's not blessed or made that way. So. But I'll come and I'll do a water fight with him if you want when I come.
Get the pistols out. Does Islam come from Catholicism? Well, if you read the Torah, which came before the Bible and came before the Quran, they both seem to plagiarize the Torah, don't they?
Well, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it's a really common faith. It comes from that same part of the world. God is a conqueror. Women are subordinate. It's the same source, I think. So who affected who? I think they all affected each other, kind of in a nutshell, right? Yeah,
it's interesting because there's a lot of the same characters in all 3 books, and there's been so many wars over definitions and how stories are written. It's crazy. Why are there no female popes?
Well, we talked about this. There was once, but she was murdered. Pope Joan, the legend is that she was an English cardinal who hid herself. She was very smart and impressed people, I think around the 9th century. And she hid her sexuality on a papal procession in Rome. She got pregnant, and on a papal procession in Rome, she gave birth to the child. And when they found out, they thought it was a miracle at first, right? But then when they found out she was a woman, they killed her on the spot, her and the baby. And in Rome, you might want to look, there's supposed to be a monument there still to her. But there's never been one because they believe women are evil and descendant of Eve, and only a man. God has testicles, right? Isn't that obvious?
Angela's inviting you to New Zealand to promote what you do. They would love this.
I'd love to come, but you'd have to help find the money to get me there because I am on a blacklist and don't have a lot of travel funds. But I would love to come. In fact, I've been invited to come to New Zealand and Australia a number of times because of the severity of what happened to Indigenous people there, and also the role of the papacy in that.
I'll answer this next one. You're getting asked what was the longest ever conclave, and I've looked it up on Google, and it is the 1268 to 71 papal election. 1268-71, following the death of Pope Clement the Fourth, was the longest papal election in history. There we go.
That'd be interesting to look into.
Yeah. Let me see. I think we're almost. Is it true, in your opinion, that only the red bits in the Bible are legit and the rest has been doctored to trick us?
Well, what I know about that is that there was this thing called in Chicago. They brought together 100 seminarians in what's called the Jesus Project, and they did a study of the New Testament and figured out what was more likely to have been actual sayings of Jesus and what were things attributed later, like the birth narrative, Jesus being born in Bethlehem. That the church put that in order to show he was a descendant of David. I mean, but there were a few simple sayings. And they said the simpler the saying, the more likely it would be to be passed word of mouth, passed on to people. Something like the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed within you, right? That saying likely came from Jesus. And they actually, I use this in sermons, and it was really great because the red lettered areas of the Bible were more likely to come from Jesus. And then black and gray indicated, no, they were created and attributed to him later by the church. Only about 12% of what's in the New Testament was attributed directly to Jesus. So it's more likely that only around 10% of his actual words in the Bible came from the historical guy, Yeshua ben Yosef, right? Jesus being the Greek word for him. So when they have red bits in the Bible, I think it's not only that, but also to emphasize what the editors thought were the most important parts of the Bible. But I know that academic, scholarly consensus seems to be that the shorter the sayings from Jesus, the more likely it was that it was actually said by him.
Do you know anything about the girl who was kidnapped, her father suddenly given a good job in the Vatican, subsequently her brother?
I'm trying to remember that case. I remember it, and I'll have to look that up. I can't give a good answer to that right now, but it was connected to a guy who started, wasn't he an employee of the Vatican who started talking about Ratzinger? And then suddenly all these things, he got arrested and put in a Vatican prison. You see, they have their own prisons. They can lock up church dissidents and the law can't touch them. This guy was in a Vatican prison and then his child died and all that. So yeah, it was to shut him up.
Is the Pope going to tell us what happened to Emmanuel's Orlandi?
I think it's that the guy we're referring to. I'm not sure. Otherwise, I'm not sure who Orlandi is.
Do you know anything about Pope Peter and the upside down cross? There are upside down crosses in the Vatican.
That's part of the myth. Peter was never a pope. That comes from the whole basis of the church claiming, that they have authority is that Jesus said, I'm going to build my church on Peter, when he wasn't talking about establishing a church. That was just editorialized later.
Right. We're almost at the hour, folks. And here we go. Do you know anything about Melbourne being built on ley lines and used for satanic rituals?
Melbourne. We've done a lot of work on Melbourne, the whole thing. Toos von Nieuwenhuis, who was in the Ninth Circle, was taken to Melbourne as a child. She was taken into not only hospitals, but military facilities, and was used experimentally. She saw children in cages there, having weapons tested on them, chemical weaponry and that. We've done a lot on Melbourne. I can't go into great detail here, but write to me. I can send you stuff. And if and when I come to Australia, it definitely is a place to hit. And one of our people, Georgina Cameron, who was investigating that, got killed. And we know who did it and people in the church responsible. So yeah, please write to me.
Kevin is on his A game, Sophia. He's been absolutely on fire tonight. Obviously, that this Pope story is one of the biggest stories in the world right now, and he's extremely busy. He's been very generous, spending 2 hours with us. And thank you, everyone, for keeping your questions on point. This has been absolutely fascinating. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, Kevin?
Lots, but I would like to soon come back and talk about getting more on the ground about what we've documented about what goes on in these networks, especially in the West Coast, which I think we should focus on in terms of the present fellow in office, Leo the 14th, because that's going to open up a lot more, including the Pan-Pacific Chinese network behind a lot of these crimes and the role of China. And also to talk about my upcoming trip to Europe. And I really want to urge people to book me into places in Europe. And also I'll be in Canada and America and then over to Europe for when universities open in September. So let's try to arrange a speaking tour and we can meet a lot of you folks in person and carry on this work.
Come and spend the night at our house if you want, Kevin.
Hey, I'll do it if they let me into England, but they deported me in 2011, so we'll see.
Oh no, oh no, oh no. Viewers, put a 1 in the chat if you'd like Kevin to come back soon. Put a 2 in the chat if you want him to bog off. I know it's all going to be 1s. And all of Kevin's links, as I've said, are in the description box. His books. You can reach out to him. You can listen to his other broadcasts. The older ones piling in. And yet again, thank you so much, my friend, coming on for such short notice. And we hope to see you soon. It's 99.9% want you to come back. All right.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone. Carry it on.
Take care, Kevin. Cheers. Good night. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye. All right, folks. What a phenomenal guest. Absolutely fascinating. And good timing, isn't it? With all of the black smoke and the Pope, the new Pope. All right, so tomorrow night, Professor Hamamoto on Diddy, Virginia, Weinstein. We possibly have Chris Todd on McCann. We've not heard from Epstein's niece, Anya Wick, this week. So that's pending. And but it's going to be another blockbuster night tomorrow night. Juliet Bryan podcast edits are almost finished on the pre-record, the Epstein Survivor. So that will be coming soon. And we've also got Anna Lee, our MK Ultra Survivor, going through the edits now. That podcast will be coming soon. And everyone seems to be really enjoying the David Icke upload we did today, the banned content. We carefully removed lots of words from it. So it's within the community guidelines. If you missed that one, check it out. And before that one this morning, we interviewed a survivor of Christian Bruckner, you know, the suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. We were all in tears. She told the story so well. She just woke up in her hotel room in Portugal, and there's a man saying her name, stood there, dressed in black. And it just gets more and more horrific from there. So if you missed that one, it's almost 2 hours long. I would urge people to find that one that we did earlier today. She was live, absolutely brave, warrior spirit. And, you know, it affected me all day after speaking to her. But her energy and her smile were radiant. And it was good to see after everything she went through. So thank you for supporting all of our guests. We have an eclectic range of them with varied viewpoints that we may not all agree with everything they say. But our job is just to bring them to you guys so you can become informed, learn more like we learn more, speaking to these people, and form your own decisions and conclusions. So we'll see some of you tomorrow.